Lemon Amiga presents a Playguide video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hello there once again, welcome to another Lemon Amiga play guide and review. This time we'll be checking out an unknown classic. This is The Shepherd, and this was developed and released in 1993. It's a Shareware title, so this was freely available, and this is freely downloadable on the Aminet, version 1.1 I think it is, and I think this is where I got it from. The Aminet package itself does come with a little bit of a manual or a bit of an intro document that you can read to get you started. Otherwise you'll just have to rely on this introduction. It tells you if you want to register, you'll get the full version of the game and the manual and a Who Eats Who guide, which is apparently very helpful. All this was possible by Obbe Vermeij, or however you pronounce that. He came from Holland, so this is a Dutch game, and I very much doubt that any of those numbers work. So let's just press a key like it says, and now we get to that main menu. From here we can't press F2 to start the demo because the demo isn't working. We can rename our shepherd, but we don't want to do that because that will mess up the password system. We can't enter a new key because we haven't got a new world key, and we don't want to quit DOS. So the only thing that we can do in this stage is to admire that huge magnificent background and then press F1. At the very start you must eliminate all of blue, that is kill all the enemies. We are the red player and blue is the blue dot on the map, and we are the red dot. And right at the start of the game it gives us all the energy we need to create whatever we like, and so you can survey the landscape. You can see we begin on an island, and the back part of it doesn't have much on it apart from rocks. That's no good to us. You can see by clicking on one of the buttons on the bottom we can choose to build something, and this being the shepherd, I'm going to build some sheep. And sheep are one of the easiest to maintain as long as you give them something to eat. And so you can see by clicking on those buttons you can move by clicking on the first one, and then when you click on that and hold it down, and sometimes you can press the arrow keys as well, the cursor keys, and then once we've done that we can click where we want it to go, and that should move that marker, that should move the sheep eventually into that kind of an area. So to lure them into that kind of an area we want to plant loads of bushes in there. So as you can tell straight away, this is a kind of a farm management game where we get to manage animals and make them grow. And as we make them grow we will deplete our energy, and that means the energy bar at the bottom will slowly disappear and it will slowly build back up again. The more animals we've got alive on the level, the more energy we'll have, and the quicker that will build up, and so the more we can build as a result. Let's click on the move icon, and now we can move that wherever we like. Let's just click on that and then click over here. We can also merge those two together by clicking on the first one and then click on the second one, and that means the first one will disappear and that is replaced by the second one. So we can move those markers around, and that is a bit fiddly to get used to. We can also move the screen around as well by using the arrows. We can also use the cursor keys, and we can also use the map, which you can see in the top right corner. checking out the enemy. They've already got some sheep running around, and the sheep eat bushes. So you can see this is a year-based, time-based game, and I'm playing this on the All-30 so it runs as smoothly as possible, but this could run on any Amiga configuration known to mankind. So even if you had half a mega memory, that's fine. So you can see the island in the middle of summer, the ocean kind of dries up and the island links to the mainland. So what we're going to do with those sheep is we're going to move we're actually going to plant a bush, you can see there, and whatever we've selected will appear directly in the middle of those arrows, you can see. So that means that we always should know what we've selected. So what I'm about to do, what I'm trying to do, is we're going to plant a bit of a bush forest over the other side, and to get those sheep off the island. Sometimes they've got a mind of their own and you can't force the sheep to do what you want. We've got two sets of sheep, so if we move one marker it means one will change, but if we combine them, I think we've just combined them, that means that all the sheep should move if we move that marker. You can see the enemy's got some horses. Sometimes we only have enough mana energy to create things one thing at a time, particularly at the start of the game. You can see it's winter and I'm planting sheep, it looks like, because I've actually got the sheep icon clicked on by mistake. I wanted to plant a bush, so let's click off that and let's plant a bush instead. Kate Bush, there she goes. So now we've got a forest. It's our first winter and you can see the snow is falling. It's very important to keep an eye on everybody during the first winter to make sure they have enough to eat, and if a pair has enough to eat then they'll breed, and that means we get young appearing on the map. So right at the start, in the very first level, we can't really build much. We can build cows, which is the black one at the end. We can build horses as well, and the horses, I think they just graze on grass. I'm not sure if they actually consume anything. But the sheep definitely need these bushes, otherwise they'll die. And so most things in the game does require some kind of a system to live. And not everything, but if you plant that ecosystem down before you plant down the animals, as you'll find out later on in the game, it's paramount to do that. And then you build up the botany before you throw in the mammals. It's now, it looks like January or February, heading into the first year. You can see the grass is now growing underneath our feet. It's now turning green, and periodically a shooting star will appear, because you notice we're in a star field at the moment. There are stars in the background. And with the All-30 everything runs nice and smoothly, and as you would expect. So I'm keeping one of the flock back on the main island, and then they'll build up. And then I'm going to take them over to what I call the Promised Land a bit later on. So what I'm actually going to do, I can click on any of these things. The trees, I think maybe the horses eat the trees actually, the fir trees, I'm not quite sure. But definitely you'll need the habitat. It looks like I've gone for another batch of sheep, so that means I've now got 6 sheep going, all on the go. And so I've got the marker for everybody else down there. Let's plant this one here. I don't want to take them over until the ground has been grown, so every single time my mana goes up on the bottom, I'm going to click on create new animal, I'm going to go to a bush and I'm going to create that habitat. The other things you can see on the bottom of the screen, one of them looks like a bear, and the other one are the turtles. And turtles breed very, very slowly. That means you only get a bit of mana back from them. And so you can see now that we've bred a bit, the mana's going up. That means we can plant more animals, or more agriculture down very quickly now. So let's begin to lure them over to this edge so that when the summer comes we can hopefully force them to move across. The mana gauges are represented on the bottom of the screen. The blue one is the enemy, which is building up very slowly, and ours is kind of like the brown one. We can also rotate the view, and we can also speed up by a month as well. If we press the double arrow keys, that will speed up time, and we can give up with the white flag and pause with the spider's web in the corner. You might notice a bunch of chameleons and things like that, snakes wrapping around just over the top of that bar, and that's a visual touch. They will move and watch what we are doing. In the summertime we'll start to hear crickets chirping, and that gives away what time of the year we're on, and the animals will only breed in the spring, and that means they'll need to survive a winter. You can see the bushes themselves will breed, and as long as you leave those alone, the bushes will start to procreate and fill in all the gaps. So what I'm doing at the moment is leading them down into that corner, because I know the enemy usually uses the east of the map and the south of it, so I'm going to try to put my units in that corner instead and keep them away from that enemy. You can see I've now moved over the marker for the sheep, and that means the majority of them, apart from the two that I'm keeping on the island, will start to move across. You can see now on the bottom of the map the horses have died, but there's still plenty of cows and they're breeding. There is a passage now connecting the enemy with its resources, and in this game you can only drop resources down right next to ourselves on the map. So if we are the red character, it means we'll need to plant down the resources, well, the animals next to them. And what am I doing at the moment? It looks like we're burning something down. Yes, by rotating the map around, that's what's confusing me. The enemy is now at the top of the map. We can release a bolt of lightning, and that will burn down all the trees that the enemy's got, and hopefully the animals will starve. The horses have already starved, so whatever they're fed on, they haven't got it. So that's one reason not to get horses, because I can't remember what they actually feed on. So tons and tons of things. So the land bridges are now built, and we can even collapse that using a special button. Once we've got enough mana, we can collapse those land bridges and everything else. That won't stop the enemy hordes coming through, but it will slow them down, because now it means they'll need to have to get through water. And we don't see any of the enemy's markers, so we can't tell where they're moving to. And we can see ours, so we can now see that we've got a line of sheep moving, and hopefully they've cleared the ground behind them, so the only way now is forwards. Let's encourage that by planting a bush down, and we know that sheep eat bushes, they also eat grass as well. I think cows eat the bushes as well, and you can see those have been chomped away, those visually chomped on the screen there. We're now going into winter. If the sheep eat those bushes too much, they'll chomp them down to nothing, and you'll have to wait for the spring in order to get new leaves on the bushes, or you'll have to wait for the young ones to grow up. It doesn't really matter when you plant things, but the seedlings and the sprouts will only come up in the spring, so I think I've got just about enough bushes here for the ever increasing flock of sheep. They just keep on doubling, so that means you need more and more to feed them on, otherwise they'll starve to death. you can use the cursor keys whilst you're planting things down, and that sometimes makes things easier to navigate, and otherwise it's just a case of lining things up, because everything's this kind of isometric 3D, just like Powermonger that we reviewed. It's pretty good, but also if you have a slow CPU it's pretty slow as well. So what can we do? Let's try to move that across, and in the manual it just says click on the move one, click on the thing, and then click it again to move it. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. So it looks like we're joining them together. Yes, we are. So that means that all the markers now, or at least the ones that I've got, everything should now be on the main island. Let's check out the enemy, and I'm really looking out for anything that the enemies drop, because just like us, it can only plant things. Uh-oh, what's that? What is that? Is that a turtle, or is that a... no, it's moving. That means it's a turtle. That's bad news, because sheep don't like turtles and ignore them. Wolves won't eat turtles either. All you can do is put a plague on them, and that's the only thing that I've found to kill them. So putting a virus on them is supposed to be as easy as pointing and clicking, but I've never actually got that to work with the turtles. If you point and click on your own sheep, they'll get the virus and they'll die just like that. But that's what you're meant to do, and if you can do that at this stage, all the better. You can see I can click on nothing and it won't do anything, and the mana won't go down, and the options at the bottom of the screen won't go down either. You can see something red bubbling up on the floor. That's actually autumn, and that's actually the leaves turning that colour, so that's not the virus. In the meantime, those turtles are indestructible. You can't put lightning onto them, it won't work. And the very last icon at the bottom is a volcano. You can't even kill them in a volcano either. But let's just try that anyway. Let's line that up. With a volcano, it will then explode and set fire to anything nearby, and that's good for taking out virtually everything else except for the turtles. And I can't see them at the moment, but I know they're there, because I know for a fact that you can't get rid of them. And there is a sink land icon as well, where we can sink parts of the land, and you can't drown turtles either. I've tried it. And you can't force wolves to starve and force them on the turtles. It won't work. See, look at that, there they are. They've climbed out of the volcano. The turtles are virtually indestructible unless you can put a plague on them, and the plague icon is just about showing now. So having all these sheep over here is good in one way, but it's not good in another. And if we use the lightning, all that will do is set fire to all this scenery. And if we put the plague on them, all that will do is put the plague on our sheep, and that's our entire flock killed. So if you're putting plagues on things, or viruses, you better make sure that something survives, because as soon as the last one of ours dies, that's level over, and as soon as the last one of the enemies dies, that's also the level over. So the good news is I've got tons of mana, and I can now generate volcanoes at will. The bad news is, to kill those turtles, I'm going to need something stronger than what I've got. So I'm going to put these bear wolves in there, whatever they are. They run like bears, they look like bears, they are bears, but according to the manual they're wolves. So every time you drop a pair of them down, they'll go towards the next food source, and they'll just run around madly unless you give them somewhere to go. Let's click on that. Click on this one, and now let's move them over, well, somewhere over here, and they will last until the end of the season, even if they haven't eaten anything. But in my naivety playing this game, I thought they had to eat sheep and make their way through it with sheep, but no. So let's just put them over to this side of the volcano, and that should mean that they avoid the sheep in the bottom corner. Otherwise the wolves will munch away our own sheep. there's nothing we can do about that at the moment, because we're going to have to put a plague on them in order to put a plague on those turtles. And turtles breed very, very slowly, and it's very cute and it's very fun to see a huge line of little baby turtles following the mum and dad around these levels. It's exceptionally cute to see that, but if they are the enemy turtles, you're going to have to kill them, and the only way to do that on this first level is to share that virus with them and basically kill everybody, because I've tried everything else. So this massive flock that we've got at the moment, it's great for building up mana, but you can see they've already chomped away at whatever they had to eat, and now unless we lead them on now to the next crop, they're going to starve. And I'm just debating whether to sacrifice the whole lot in order to kill those turtles, because if we let those turtles continue, they'll continue and continue, and the enemy will release some more turtles. So with this first level, you have to get the enemy between its batch of releasing turtles, and that means killing off all of the enemy as much as you can. And as soon as the turtles are released, then you're going to have to think about the viruses, and that's game over. So one way or the other, the enemy will die, or you're going to have to start again. And that's one downside of this game. If you mess it up, you're going to have to start the level again, or you're going to have to get some better tactics together. You can see sometimes we can't move markers, and if that happens you can click on them and the designation marker will disappear straight away. Sometimes you can put markers on bits of land where you can't move them, and that's a bug in the game, but you'll just have to deal with that. If you move them to grassland, I think 9 times out of 10 you can move them, but if you move them to the side of a mountain, sometimes you can't. So that's a bit of a warning. We can move these wolf markers around this sheep because it's on grassland, but sometimes if you've created a volcano, sometimes the computer can't find where it is because it's now buried underneath a volcano. So that can happen. But I'm still looking at those turtles and I'm still looking at the plague, and so let's release the plague. That now depletes our mana, and that means our options go down a little bit, and not everybody will get the plague straight away, but you can see it is moving, and as one thing gets it, it will then spread to everything else, and that means everything in this vicinity will eventually get the plague. It's a shame to see our own sheep getting the plague, but that's what I really wanted, the turtles, and I think they die at the end of each year. Unfortunately, I've just sailed straight through the year, so that means these animals will probably linger on now until the beginning of the next year, moving more slowly and slowly dying of the plague. So that's the bad news. But the good news is that's all now taken care of, one way or the other. Everybody's going to die of the plague, so let's move them over so that everybody, including that one, all of the turtles the enemy's released, now need to die. And the wolves will only appear in the springtime, and it's winter at the moment, so the wolves aren't on the prowl, so they basically, well, bears hibernate. That's why I think the bears, because they're hibernating. So the bears, let's call them, hibernate, and it's only until spring that they come out again and start roving around that landscape. So that's why you can't see them, and that's why it can take ages, because they swim over the water towards the marker. Here they are, they've just swam over that water, so they're still now moving. We're now into our 3rd or 4th season, and if the wolves catch any of the sheep with the plague, guess what, they're now going to get the plague. So that's why I'm hopefully moving them to the east of the island, leaving the west to suffer. You won't find too much information about this game online. In fact, I couldn't find virtually anything except for one review that was written by Predseda on the Lemon Amiga website that was released in May 2023. And finally, the only thing that was stopping me beating this level is the fact that I couldn't kill those turtles. So we're in summer now, the animals are flaking away if we get rid of them, and look at that, some more bears have showed up, and that's the enemy's bears. So let's move ours into that area, and it shows a symbol. I'm not quite sure that's meant to be a wolf or not, whatever. The enemies all have blue eyes, and our friendlies all have red eyes. So let's check out the enemy. Sometimes they manage to get onto these outlying islands, but because this is just the introductory part of the game, it looks like we've managed to kill off their sheep down there by using that forest fire earlier on. That means all the sheep and all the horses are now dead. That's the good news. The bad news is, as soon as the enemy gets some more mana, which it will do eventually, it will put some more down. Look at that, some more sheep are now on the mainland, they're now on the west. That's away from the virus. We can't blow them up, unfortunately, with a volcano. The volcano, whatever it is, only tends to be very good at, well, removing trees and causing forest fires. And the sheep, just like the turtles, will survive if you try and blow them up like that. And wherever the sheep are, there it is. It's now emerged from the volcano. So you can't kill sheep with a volcano, and you can't sink them either, and you can't set them on fire. But you can get them with a plague. Of course, the game that set all this off was Populous, and it was Peter Molyneux again at Bullfrog who created this kind of environment. And well, it's debatable whether he invented it. Of course, if you remember Virus, which was by the makers of Elite, David Braben and co. They did Virus, but I think Virus came out after Populous. I'm not sure, I'd have to check that out. But it's those guys that invented this format and ported it over to the PC, and there are precious few of these games on the Amiga. And of course Populous 2 came out, and Ganesha, but apart from that, and the Robin Hood game that we didn't manage to get reviewed in the last series. But you can see now it's a theatre of death, and on top of all that, it's raining. That won't do anything at this point. It will irrigate the plants that we've got growing, but apart from that, it's not going to ease the pain of all these animals that are dying. So all we need to do is to get rid of the enemy sheep with the bears, and you can see we've got some of our own sheep still alive. We have to make sure that none of the virus animals return to our home, otherwise these sheep will get the virus, and that includes the enemies as well. So we're now moving on. It should be getting towards now winter time, and all of the virus, well, it's taking its toll. Everybody's collapsed in the field. So have any of the wolves survived, or the bears, whatever they are? Have any of those survived? Well, the sheep have survived. They haven't got the virus. We can't sink them, we can't set them on fire with lightning either. All we can do is send the wolves out. We're still waiting for that, but the marker, unfortunately, I think is under this one, because I can't find the wolf marker anymore. We've got our sheep on top of the volcano, and our wolves, or bears, whatever they are, it looks like they've caught the virus. And look at that, we can even roll the screen down to reveal workbench. But what do we do at this point? I'm still debating whether we're going to wait for that last winter to kill off the remnants of that virus before we send the wolves over. You can see bones piled up everywhere from dead animals, and some of those are the enemy's dead animals, which is what we wanted. And you can see 2 shells there of the turtles. I'm panicking, thinking that they're not going to die, but they are. One of them has just turned into a pile of bones. Well, it will do eventually. So yes, we've got the turtles. So that's catastrophe as far as I'm concerned, but all the enemies dead now except for 2 sheep. So I'm still waiting for those bears. It's winter time, so they're hibernating, they're not going to come out, but everything's now focused on, if I can find them, and there they are on the island. So what I'm going to do is go and play around. Let's lower it and look at that. The sheep start running off towards the land and start panicking, and as soon as they reach the land they'll stop moving and they'll take a breath again. And so sheep are intelligent, they will move towards food, and they will not swim out into the ocean and things like that, and they will run around, and you can actually scare people as well, scare the animals. That's the 4th button along on the bottom. If you do that, it will simply go nee, nee, like Monty Python, and that will scare the animals and make them run off. That's not too helpful, but if we wanted to, we could force the sheep to run into this death zone, which has now survived 2 whole years, but luckily the last throes of it are now over. One last sheep there, and it looks like we are dead on this side. So we better build something quickly before everything dies. Let's plant some sheep down again. And now you can see it's spring again. So let's make the crop again, flock of sheep, and let's make them. And oh, look at that, we've managed to get a lamb on our home island. Hopefully, between turtles, we can kill those last 2 sheep. If you can do that at this point, with a couple of bears, whatever you've got left, it's game over. If you can't, the enemy's going to get itself some more turtles, and we're going to have to start it off all over again. So what I'm doing is setting off some more bears and pointing those hopefully towards some grassland, and they will run around, they will hunt for enemies, and they will hunt for everything. If it's our sheep, they'll take them out. Our cows, they'll take them out. And this is kind of a training level. If you can get through this, then hopefully you can get through the rest. And look at that, the enemy's planted some horses down, because the enemy can only plant them near itself. It's now April, it looks like, so let's set a bolt of lightning off. And that will mean the palette changes. If we scroll anywhere else on the map, that will remain the same, but in that area the screen changes, so that means it gets darker and everything turns blue, which is fantastic. If you move away from the area, it's like it melts in and out, and that's absolutely genius. Let's try it again. The entire colour palette changes, and you can see finally we can only just scorch those trees. We can't set them on fire because it's raining. So using lightning when it's raining is not a good idea. Definitely in the middle of summer, when everything's nice and hot, means the grass burns and the trees catch a fire very, very quickly. Since I recorded this footage and did this narration, I actually got very, very, very far with the game. In fact, I've managed to get all the way up to level 38 at the moment, so not far to go to, I think, 52 levels in the game itself, and I wrote all those codes down on the Lemon Amiga database page, and all the solutions as well, in case players want to play this. If they get stuck, they can just look up the solution on Lemon Amiga. And I've learnt so much about the animals, and I've put in a Who Eats Who guide as well in the cheats section. And it wasn't until pretty recently that I realised that turtles actually will eat cactuses, and they are the only animal which will eat a cactus. And I tried to put every animal under the sun next to cactuses, and finally I noticed that the computer players' turtles were eating them no problem. So you can do that, but they are the only animal which will do so, and mankind will actually get rid of turtles for us. If you send man, they are the only creature that can kill them unless you put a virus on them, and those are the only two ways to kill turtles. But if you have sea turtles, the only way to kill them is to starve them out. So on some missions, the aim of the game is to build up as many animals as possible. Sometimes you have to eat up all of the enemy's habitat, and that means the enemy will die. Sometimes you have to conquer all of the lands and fill up all the map with animals, and sometimes you have to use your animals strategically to take out some of the enemy. And once the enemy's dead, sometimes you can do that directly by sending in bears and lions and men and T-Rexes, and sometimes you have to do that the long way. So every mission plays slightly differently, and you'll get to know what all of the things on the bottom do. And surprisingly, there is one scare feature, and for the longest time I didn't realise what the scare feature did, but if the enemy is walking towards your habitat and you want to scare it off, all you need to do is press the scare button, and that will mean that the enemy runs away. And if the enemy doesn't eat within a certain time limit, they will die, and so you can actually use the scare tactic to force the enemies to die before they've even eaten a meal. And so that's a bit of a trick, and maybe something that you can make use of a bit later in the game. And definitely you'll have to get used to putting things into patches, because as soon as you clump things together, the enemy definitely will send something, either directly lions and bears to eat them, or it will put a volcano there, or it will set fire to the forest and things like that. And so the only thing that the enemy cannot do is plant down bushes and habitat. So if you are wise, the enemy will eat its own habitat and then starve to death. And so if you are away from the enemy, you can simply send in lions and bears to eat them and keep all of your animals away. And you will get a bonus mana every time you put a different species down. And sometimes you can win the game simply by putting one species down and letting it breed and breed forever. But if you put 2 down and if you put 3 down, well, the bigger the animal, the better and the more mana that you're going to get. So sometimes if you put elephants down and giraffes, they will give you more mana than if you put down just a few rabbits and gazelles. And definitely turtles take the longest time to build up, but sometimes you can have over 100 turtles on one level, and that means that you've got tons and tons of mana coming in towards the end of the game. So there are lots of tricks to remember, and as I say, every single level introduces something or a different tactic or a new way to play this game that maybe the player wasn't used to. Some of them can be completed within minutes, and some of them take hours. So for me, this game gets 8 out of 10, but it doesn't have a save feature, because these games can take maybe 2 hours to play through end to end without a time limit, or an infinite amount. The fact that it doesn't have a save feature is a limitation, because it means you have to complete it all in just one sitting. You'll have to make use of all of the habitat that you find and steal the enemy's habitat away from it as quickly as possible and eat it all up. And sometimes on some missions it's simply a matter of outproducing the enemy, and that means that you're going to have a food shortage, and that means your guys are going to be running around starving. And on some missions, if it's cumulative mana, that isn't so bad, because you'll get your mana cumulatively. That means if anything dies, it doesn't matter. But on some missions that doesn't happen, and if anything dies, you'll lose mana, which simply means that if you need 200 ostriches to beat the level, those 200 or 100 must survive, otherwise you're going to lose mana. And then as soon as you start to lose mana, it means you're going further and further away from beating that game. So definitely caution has to be remembered, and sometimes you can even skip through time as well if you want to wait For habitat to grow, sometimes it's a good idea to plant habitat in the springtime, because every single level starts on the springtime, because that means bushes will spread, and bushes and cacti and everything else will only spread, and reeds and things like that, they will only spread in the springtime. And you will hear waves lapping on the beach when it is springtime, and that's your cue to plant them. Because if you drop a bush and it automatically gives you 4 more bushes before the summertime, they will eventually grow, and soon you've got 5 bushes. If you plant bushes at any other time of the year, then you will only have 1 bush, and that means any cows or sheep or horses or anything else will simply eat it. And cows are fairly sturdy and hardy, sheep aren't very hardy, and horses are the least hardy animal perhaps of them all. You can give horses bushes and everything that it needs to eat, but it still might starve to death, so sometimes you can't do anything about that. So sometimes the slowest animals can pay dividends at the end of the game. Sometimes if it's an animal like an elephant, which will munch down a forest in seconds, it's a good idea to let the habitat grow first of all, and you'll definitely need the stepping stone so that you can get your elephants to the enemy territory. Because it's the art of building up islands in the game, islands of food, and if it looks like that they're running out of food, you better make sure that you have the mana to give them food, and the more animals that you've got on the level, the more mana will be available to you. At the beginning, dropping food is a severe deficit, but if you have maybe 100 animals on the level, then dropping food will hardly cost you any mana at all, because you're getting so much mana coming in. And you've got the small mana where you can build up all the magic spells and things like that, and make animals and drop food, and the big mana will accumulate in the box, and you can see sometimes the enemy's accumulated mana will appear as well, and sometimes on time critical levels that won't appear and you'll just have to guess. So sometimes when the enemy's mana reaches all the way to the top, that will beat you in the level, and sometimes if you don't have enough power to beat the enemy and the enemy is overwhelming you, sometimes the game will end early and the computer just says, well, you are useless, try again. And you have no idea why you failed, simply you were too slow. So sometimes you have to get on the move and you can't afford to wait. You have to drop animals down and let them breed straight away, and sometimes the levels let you wait a while before anything happens. And you can even wait for the enemy to make the first move as well, and on some levels definitely the enemy will wait for you to make the first move, and any reeds or bushes or grass that you plant down, the enemy will simply run towards it and start eating it up. So those are fun levels. Sometimes you can spawn yourself right on top of the enemy, so that means you're out competing against each other. So the game does have great different scenarios. It also has, apart from the jungle, it also has the plains and the Arctic tundra as well, and don't forget the Jurassic levels and the Command and Conquer tank levels as well. So there is variety in offer, and I just wish that there was maybe a Stegosaurus or something else in the Jurassic levels to shake it up a bit. And with the Command and Conquer, I wish there were POWs or something to rescue by the helicopters, because the medical helicopters appear to do absolutely nothing except for feed on dead bodies. So definitely wasted opportunities to make this game absolutely fantastic, but this is a Shareware title. This was released for free, and it's the full game, and as far as I'm concerned, along with Sneech and Scorch tanks, it ranks definitely amongst my top 5 greatest Shareware titles of all time, and on a good day maybe it ranks up there even at number 1, because I can come back to this game and play it for hours and hours, given a Sunday and given plenty of time available, and sometimes the levels defeat the player and make them scratch their head and bang their head against a brick wall, but sometimes you can employ tactics, and I haven't really found a tactic for raising and lowering the water level, and that's only temporary anyway, but you can see raising and lowering the land is possible, and that is permanent in the game, and that is definitely great and recommended. You can also kill things with a virus, you can also kill things with man-eating plants as well. And man-eating plants in this game, sometimes they can walk around of their own accord and they can chase after enemies, and if any enemy wanders into that territory, then that means they'll die. And if the enemy is just about to get full accumulated mana and complete the level, you better make sure that you send something in to kill them, otherwise they will win and you won't. So, as I say, sometimes you have to juggle keeping everything alive. Definitely the goats and the rabbits are the hardest things to keep alive, because goats can eat moss in seconds, and rabbits can eat bushes in seconds if there are a lot of them. And rabbits, you can't even move them a few feet before they die, sometimes if they don't get enough food. So you have to balance it out, but they really do give you tons of mana. And ducks as well, they'll gobble the reeds up, so sometimes animals have to make a choice what to put down. Sometimes the lightest eating animals are the best because you get the mana for them, and it means the habitat gets to grow. And as long as you have more habitat than animals to feed it upon, then that means you're going to get tons of mana. And if not, then you're going to have to start planting things down. And sometimes it's a mad frantic rush to plant down as many trees as possible, and definitely split your animals off and clump them around the map, otherwise the enemy will send in volcanoes and things to kill them. And so this game does have seasons, it has weather and it has rain, and I haven't found a use for the wind icon, but definitely you can burn down the enemy's habitat. When you have to kill all the enemy, it's very useful to do that. And sometimes the lightning will strike a tree and sometimes not. But definitely, if you're going to use lightning, do that in the springtime. Because as soon as it gets to autumn time, it starts to rain and that will put out all of your fires. And sometimes the enemy can do that to you as well. And so you have to be ready with a rain icon to put out the fires. And so the enemy isn't too devious in this game, and as the game goes on, the game even gets easier, because as you learn to defeat the enemy by letting it eat its own habitat and starve to death, then you'll find it's even easier, and you'll learn those tricks and tips, and which animals work in which combinations, and if they send in, well, it's the food chain, if they send in wolves, send in humans, if they send in humans, send in bears, and if they send in bears, send in T-Rexes or whatever you've got to kill them. And once you've reached the highest level of the food chain, then you can't really do much. And definitely be aware of feeding on your own animals. If you've got accumulated mana, then that's fantastic, but if it's ordinary mana, or if you have to defeat the enemy by accumulating more than they have, then definitely use the bears to eat the enemy, and don't use them to eat yourself. Definitely it's a good idea to press the abort and check out the map and check out all of the landscape and the enemy's food wherever it is and the enemy's trees, because the enemy can't create any food of its own. It will always be given food and habitat, and so if you wait a while, the enemy will send its animals out to those areas, and once you've discovered that, then that means you know the enemy's tactics and its battle plan. And so by looking at your animals and studying what you've got available in the region, it means you can build a stepping stone perhaps towards that, or even just send out those animals. If you've got cattle, they will walk a long way on the map, and if you're sending animals across water, that means that they will soon die because it takes more energy to cross water, and they are dumb, they will go in a straight line to your marker. So if you can force the enemies to walk over land, they will walk further, but it's always a good idea to make them eat first of all before they even set off, because that means they'll be able to walk twice as far having eaten already. So definitely observe those little tricks and tips, and the goats will eat themselves out of all their habitat within, well, 5 or 10 minutes. So unless you've got an end game going on where you have to beat the enemy and you've got tons and tons of mana, like this example, don't send the goats out until the last minute, and the enemy, if you're not careful, will send their goats out and eat all of that moss, and so you'll have to watch out for that, because if you do that, then you can't use your goats any longer. So these levels are time critical, and that means some of them are fun, and you'll have to get used to splitting up all your different creatures and also mixing them together and sending them all over the map in search of food, and you have to get used to putting down food a few seasons in advance of anticipating moving your animals there, and then the food will multiply. You can get free bushes and free reeds and free trees before you've even got there. Otherwise it will be a race against time, because you will have loads and loads of animals all wanting to feed on it because they'll be hungry, and that means you'll have precious little left unless you've got over the habitat balance that they need to survive. And definitely the man-eating plants, you can see taking over at the top of the island, and that's fantastic. It just means that now we've got the space left on the map, which means we can take it over, and every single map needs a different tactic. And definitely some of the comments on Lemon Amiga, Predseda said that this game was very repetitive, and once you've got the formula it's repetitive, but it does give you a different variety of animals in every single map, apart from the Arctic, which also always gives us, you know, seals and penguins and that kind of thing. But even in the Arctic, sometimes you need to feed those on the green seaweed that's floating around, sometimes you need to feed them on reeds, sometimes you need to get them away from the enemy as far as possible, sometimes you need to send them to the enemy and eat the enemy's food as much as possible while you're waiting for things to grow. So no two level plays identically, and sometimes it's a panic to figure out what you're supposed to do. So I have a ton of respect for this game, more than I ever had back in the day, because I never knew how to play it. I do love the 3D interface. I love the fact that it's pretty quick even on a 000 processor. I might be using an all-30 on this one, but believe you me, I've tried it on the 000 and it's virtually identical, except there is a ton of slowdown when you have over 100 animals chomping around and eating things on that level. So it is possible to play it with a stock 7 MHz Amiga. And that's another level completed, and it will always give you a nice philosophical piece of advice at the end, and that, if you read that, sometimes it can make you sit back and think for a while about the art of war. And definitely it's the art of war in this game, only with animals. So I think it's a genius idea, and I think for me this game deserves a high score. But what I'm waiting for, look at that, the wolves are slowly chomping their way towards the enemy, and they will stop and eat, and it will take them a season to do that. Luckily the seasons in this game move pretty quickly. We're already into autumn, and in the winter, don't forget, they disappear, so we better make sure that they move pretty quickly to their target. So let's keep an eye on everybody. Let's see if... oh no, that's another enemy sheep, and it looks like there's only one horse left, and there's at least 2 sheep. So it looks like we're running off towards one of them, and more have multiplied. So we are juggling at the moment with our hands full, and again I've got a horrible feeling that the turtles, there they are, turtles are now on the rampage. So before they get a family together, I'm going to have to release the virus again. In an ideal world you could do that directly over the top of them, and I've known that to happen. I don't think that the virus carries if it's in the middle of a rainstorm, so that could particularly be why it's not working. I don't know. You can tell if it's working because that will automatically deplete our mana, which is like an S shape, you can see, and it's almost all the way up there. At least it's as far as we're going to get it, I think, on this first level, and I think on the second level you have to get it all the way up there. So I'm still trying to release the virus, and look at that, we've done it, but the turtles are not dying. We can wave over our sheep and kill out our entire flock instantly, but the turtles are not dying. I don't know if we're supposed to be putting it on them or the destination marker, but whichever way I choose it, they're not dying. So the only way to infect them that I know of is to chase a flock of sheep into them, give them the virus and make them die like that, and hopefully split the island in half again. And the turtles move very, very slowly, very slowly, so you have to make sure that they're over the right area, otherwise you'll be infecting most of the map. Let's check out those bears, let's check out those sheep. There's a couple of them, and the bears are going for them. Well, you can see there's another horse, so I think there's supposed to be 4 bears there, but I can only see 3 of them. And on this side, well, the cows have multiplied. So let's lay down that virus again. Let's kill everybody and let's hope that it reaches these sheep and those sheep will infect the turtles. And you can see one of the sheep making its way around the volcano. Now eventually, because it's a virus, it'll kill every single thing unless you've got those on a separate island. And even if you sink the islands, the animals can still wander across, so you're never safe from the virus until the last creature that has it dies. Or unless you manage to get them separate enough, and if it's wolves or bears or whatever they are, you have to make sure that they chase the enemies, and once you've eaten all the enemies, they'll come back and start chasing us again, and then they'll get the virus and die. So you can see an enemy has made it over to our island. It has not got the virus, but it's pretty easy to unleash a bear on an enemy on our own island. You can see we have got a bear marker there, 2 horses, and the virus is slowly creeping its way across, and those turtles are still unaffected. So now the bones are starting to pile up again. The animals are slowly moving towards the food sources, which are running out. That means they're heading towards the turtles, and it doesn't look like I can select the marker to move them, but if they're in the vicinity, sometimes they'll just catch it on the wind, and that's a distinct possibility. They'll just catch it if they're anywhere near within about 3 squares of something, as long as the wind's blowing. So it's winter again now, it's frozen ground, so we can see, and well, still not being infected unfortunately. I'm beginning to wonder whether this tactic on this particular run is going to actually work, but eventually it will work, I can guarantee that. Look at this, if I click on that now, it seems to work, but no, they actually caught it off that sheep that was wandering by. It hasn't reduced our mana. So finally, so we've got the enemy turtles, so there's just 1 enemy cow on our land, and so let's dump some more bears across to get rid of it. And is it in that hollow, or is that just blue I can see down there? I don't know. Let's just move the marker down there and let the bear investigate it. And bears stay alive as long as there are animals to prey on. So that's one big worry. As soon as the animals run out, it doesn't mean that they're dead if you sacrifice your own, but we're now going to have to wait a few seasons for that virus to run out of its own accord and burn out before we can get anybody else over there. And that means we might have to reboot Plan A again for the 3rd time, and I hope we can do it between turtles. Let's reboot Plan A again. Let's put some sheep down, and let's see. Well, still a horse there. Oh, look at that, we've managed to get a young wolf or a young bear, so we're now breeding out in the field. So hopefully as that continues, they've now eaten the sheep, so I've got a feeling that that's the last enemy horse. In fact, I know it is. That's the last enemy horse in the game. It's fun to see that little bear or whatever it is. Unfortunately, every animal in the game has its own sound effect, and most things do, including the crickets. So I have great respect for this game. I definitely say it's worth 7.5 out of 10. And given the fact that Lemon Amiga gave it 72, and after I rate this it's probably going to be even more than that, but given that fact, it's fun. I hate the unlabeled buttons. I hate that the volcano does nothing, and the lightning apparently, apart from setting fire to a forest, does apparently nothing, and the sync feature does nothing either on this first level. And it's very difficult, but once you get onto the second level and once you progress through the game and you begin to understand it, suddenly it begins to make sense, and it's a matter of creating the landscape for the animals, breeding those until the eaters will eat the sheep and that kind of thing, and die turtles, that's what I want you to do. Die turtles, die. And it's a great feeling when finally it actually happens. So you can see with every level also the landscape will change, the trees will change, the seasons will change. Sometimes you can be in a tundra, sometimes you can be in a temperate zone, sometimes you can be all the way out there in the desert. So we've now, the virus is spreading, but the last of the animals are dying. We've got a cow on our land, but it's dying. We've got sheep on our land. As long as they continue to survive, that's okay. And maybe I should be planting a bush, actually, to save those sheep, maybe even force them to... Oh, look at that. Not bad. Everything's dead now. We win. The gods think you should know this. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Well, looking at my ex-wife, I'm not sure about that, but you can definitely see some nice colour effects on this OCS game, and you can see now some nice bright clouds. So that takes us back to the title screen, and if your password is nobody because you haven't put your name in, it will come out with a stock set of passwords. In fact, I think it's JNZKJ it says, even though the N looks like an M. And in the second one, fill your mana meter all the way to the top. There is no time limit. So you can see we have got lions, we've got turtles again, I certainly don't want that. And we've got cows, which looks more like an anteater, I'm not bothered about them. And we've got a new variety of trees now, and those are savanna trees. We're on level 2, it gives us all different animals. Flamingos, I'm not quite sure what they eat in this game. In real life they eat lots of plankton krilly type things that exist in a pink kind of salt lake, inland salt lake, and that's why they're pink, because of the salt. So pink flamingos, but in this game I'm not quite sure what they eat, so even though I'm going to release those now, they're going to die pretty soon. That looks like a wolf, but it isn't, it's simply the top of a rock. What we need to do is get to all these islands and populate them with tons and tons of trees. And once we've done that, to raise the mana to the top by having tons and tons of animals running around, that means we'll complete the level. Then we'll move on to a new level, and in this one we actually get some extra things. We get lions, which go around. Obviously you don't want to unleash them until it's the end of the game, because they basically eat everything else. So as soon as one lion has killed something, you better make sure that something's breeding, and then, well, every animal actually ranks up. So one rhinoceros is worth maybe 4 sheep, and one elephant is worth maybe 2 rhinoceros. So the animals do actually rank up, and so that's a special tip for the game. So if you want extra mana, if you get the largest and the slowest, you'll get more mana for doing them per animal, and that means it's going to rank up quicker. So yep, if you put in your own name. If I'd have put Dan now, then the level 2 password would be different. And so if you're following passwords and entering them in, you better make sure that the name that you enter at the beginning of the game matches the password, because if I change it to Dan, that means all of the level codes in the game will be completely different. And that's simply move land up and down. That'll make the land appear in a wave, so if you do that over the oceans often enough, hopefully that will build up the land in between them. And sometimes you have to play the waiting game, and play this game, play it the long way, and that's what's the good thing about it. Sometimes you've got hours and hours to kill. You can just develop your own ecosystem and just let it grow and watch all kinds of natural disasters happen where everything gets killed and has to be started all over again. So that's kind of this game in a nutshell. It's a zoo. It's a bit like the eco game that we saw, or we are going to see, only this time it's on a much bigger scale. It's certainly not as confusing as Sim Earth, which we're never going to see because that's just too confusing for me. But it is kind of halfway between, and on the second level you can see what I like to do is build up the palm trees. All the reeds in the water will eventually spread out and develop, and therefore the rhinoceroses, they eat the reeds, and the monkeys will make a huge loud noise when the lions are attacking. And it's good to have some lions because they rank up over the monkeys. You can see tons of enemy monkeys there, and even though we've put the lion marker down, the lions are the most ignorant animal in the game because the cats still completely ignore us, and even though we've put the lion marker down, they are nowhere near the enemy monkeys. You might also hear young lions saying meow meow, which is another fun thing. There's definitely always two animals in every level that makes a noise. Speeding up that footage, all I'm doing is laying down some more trees because every time an animal breeds it will require another tree, and so you'll need tons of trees to keep this amount of monkeys on the go. And the reeds sometimes can take care of themselves. It depends how many rhinos you've got going on. And so all I'm doing is laying down trees. You can see the marker at the very bottom of the screen is our mana. That builds up on the left, it builds up slowly, and on the right that's our cumulative one. So we're at the top now on the cumulative one, and we're almost there on the building up one. So surely in the next 5 minutes now I should have the ecosystem when you place those last few down. It's not going to deplete our mana too much, because if wildlife needs food, placing that down will actually give us something eventually, so we're not going to lose mana placing tons of trees down everywhere. And so that just means that every one of those populations survives. And on this play I had to use the virus again to kill off my entire population, to kill off the enemies. But in this one what I've realised is as long as we outpopulate the enemies it doesn't really matter. So fast forwarding on, that's another one. The gods think you should know this. Things are almost always what they seem. That's fantastic to see that, and it's a great relief as well. That means we get the second level password, joins, or whatever that is. I'm not quite sure that's an M or an N, but you can see we're now moving on to another world. And now it's Tundra, and that means in Tundra there's now 2 different islands, and it's our job to beat the Tundra. So it's a whole new different thing, and yes, we can plant grass, but that will die unfortunately straight away, and evergreens, there's no point doing that. So it's basically penguins and seals that we want, and ducks don't really breed quick enough, I've found, to make a huge difference. So the seals and the penguins and everything else eats reeds, so that gives you a clue. If you plant loads of reeds down before anything else, then they can eat something. Everything needs reeds except for the polar bears, which will feed on the seals and the penguins. So the ducks need reeds as well. So I have played this. I managed to get through this level on the very first try. It took maybe an hour or so, but unfortunately I didn't record it. You are offered a job as a riverboat gambler. That gives you a clue to how to complete that level. Now we move on to World 3, and Joffles is the password. And this time you must complete the mana to the top again, cumulatively, whatever that means, and that means we need to outbreed the enemy. Let's check out what we've got on this particular level, and it's new trees that we've got. We've also got deer, eagles as well, and even mankind makes an appearance, so we can raid the enemy. So this is feeling like megalomania at this point. So I do have infinite respect for this game. I think it deserves at least 8 out of 10. It has that full price quality feel to it, and I would have paid $24.99 for this game. It has an out of the box zoo on a disc feel, and I love this game. So thank you for viewing this review, and I'll see you again in another one. Thank you.